So I grew up in America. You grew up in Kenya.
Yeah.
Was sex talked about in your family at all?
Never.
I had sex before I knew really what an orgasm was.
My cousin, who talked to me about sex, had like the best idea. And she said, if you ever had sex with someone and you make the choice to have sex with them, when you wake up the next day, don't regret it.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. It's not all black and white.
My name is Cera, I'm black.
I'm Matthew, I'm white. This is the interracial
This is the interracial podcast. You've
Welcome.
drunk too much wine.
Today we are having a sex and wine conversation.
Sex and wine. Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. So, we usually record our podcast during the day, but tonight we thought to talk about sex would be better to do that over a glass of wine, and doing that over a glass of wine at 11 o'clock in the morning would mean we're alcoholics.
And we're not.
And we're not.
So we had dinner and decided we're gonna, record the podcast.
So here we are. Sex is definitely a important topic in almost any relationship. I guess there are probably some where it's just not that important, but I don't know those people that well, if they're out there, or if so, I don't know that that's the case because they don't talk about it because it's not important.
Yeah, it's definitely an important conversation for a couple to have.
Yeah. Last year I read a book called No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover. And one of the things that kind of stood out for me was how he was talking about like when to start having sex. And he's a therapist and he's started a lot of men's groups and things like that. And one of the things that he said was like, wait as long as you can. Because, and I don't remember this verbatim, but one of the things that was interesting to me is he said, once you start having sex, there's a slowing down of the development of the relationship, as though at that point there's something within your relationship that gets locked in. And once again, I don't remember it verbatim, but that stuck with me because, I don't know, it just resonated. And I feel like in a time when so often people are like, that's an important marker is when you have sex, that and there's a lot of, particularly from the male side, like, get it as soon as you can, on what date do you ask for sex and what number date you're supposed to have sex, all these things. I was like, wait, that's kind of an important topic, I think, to address.
Yeah. So when we first started dating, we didn't have sex until 2 weeks. How many weeks in?
No, it was well over 2 weeks because once we kind of knew we were dating, it was still like a few days before we even had after our first date. That was on a Wednesday, and the following Sunday, after we'd been hanging out virtually every day, was when we finally had our first kiss. And I did not. We went on a hike, and then after the hike, we had a picnic. And we read to each other in the park, and it was very romantic, and your head was on my lap while I was reading. And at one point, I think your head was on my shoulder or something. You were close enough where I decided I'm going to lean in for the kiss. And you didn't lean back. And I was like, well, I guess she's not ready.
Not into me.
Yeah, or not into me. Maybe I'm reading this wrong. And because we have mutual friends, I wanted to be very careful about how I moved forward. It was like, if we're going to see each other in our friends circles, I want, everyone to feel like they were respected.
Yeah. So right before I'd met you, I had told my best friend that I wanted to have sex with meaning. And of course, this is just I go for it for women who just go out and have sex. And I had done that a part of my life, but I was like, the next guy that I'm going to date, I want to have meaningful sex. And so after that, I just stopped. It was like, I am not going to have sex with anyone if I'm not in a committed relationship with them. And yeah, so she was like, when I met you, she was like, you told me this last month. It was last year. And she was like, I dare you. We had a bet. I bet you not to sleep with him for I don't know how long it was.
No, is that what happened? Because I remember it differently.
Yeah, it was she was like,
We were so like into each other after like the first week. You're like, you guys are gonna have sex like within like right away, and you
She,
were like, no.
yeah, because I had told her I didn't want to have sex before I had met you. Like, I remember that conversation with her so well. And then once I met you, she's just like, you're going to sleep with him and forget like what you had said. And I was like, no, I'm not. And then she was like, I bet you
And it
to
was like,
not sleep with him.
and it was, we had already, by that time you had that conversation, we had been together for, oh, so by the way, that Sunday, I left. I didn't kiss you. But the text messages that went back and forth after I left, I was like, I'm coming over to say goodnight before I go to sleep. That's when I finally got my first kiss.
You did get your first kiss.
Yep. And then you also got your first kiss, by the way. It's the 21st century.
That's true. I got my first kiss. But I didn't initiate it, so maybe it's still, for me, it's still the 20th century.
Yeah.
I wish I had initiated it, but I didn't, so.
Yeah, but that time you leaned in.
I did lean in.
You leaned in. I might have started, but you definitely said, I'm ready with your body motions.
Oh.
You know, so like, and that was, you know, obviously in an age of consent, I think that obviously, you know, I don't know how much kissing sort of moves into that territory or not. But to me, the consent wasn't like, may I kiss you? The consent for me was I leaned in, you didn't lean back. I was like, okay, well then it's not time. And then when I leaned in and you met me, that to me was consensual.
Got it.
You know, without having to necessarily verbalize it, which I think verbalizing obviously is very important. We can talk about that at some point. But in that case, to me, you leaning in was consensual.
So, yeah, once my friend dared me to bet.
She was like, I bet you're going to like do it within, it was like 2 weeks.
She was like, within 2 weeks. And then I came to you and I was like, okay, I made this bet with my friend. And she thinks I'm going to lose. And I think I'm going to lose too.
And I was
because I'm so attracted to you. And you were like,
I am going to make sure you win that bet.
yeah.
And you won that bet.
I did win that bet. She was like, every day she would call and she's like, did you do it? And I'm like, nope, I did not.
So I feel like by the time, it was probably about a month from our first kiss until we had sex. And that was a long time. And also saying we were waiting, but it wasn't like, to me, there was something that was also exciting about it. And we were very sexual. We just weren't having sex.
Sex, yeah.
That said, it would have definitely been called sex if you weren't my girlfriend. Like if it was going back to an entanglement from our last week's conversation, if you and I were in an entanglement, that would pretty much count. But
yeah,
right? That would definitely count.
Definitely.
We were definitely having an entanglement, only we were entangled with each other and there was no one else involved.
Yeah, and it was fun because we were like out to win. Like you were out to help me win this bet.
Yeah.
You know, even in moments when I was just like, I don't care. Like, let's just do this.
And so for me as a man, to have like a month of that kind of energy without having an orgasm was incredibly empowering. You know, because there's so much of this conversation, I think, that comes up, which is like, as a man, I need it, you know?
Yeah.
And basically what, to me, yeah, sure, we have certain biological needs and I want to respect that. But the other side of that is you are now like, I don't want to be a slave to my sexual urges and my sexual desires. I don't want to, like, I have to have this in order to feel okay about my life. Like, I think, you know, particularly, you know, okay, so for a month, I didn't, and I kept that energy inside. And there's also a lot of literature around rechanneling sexual energy and stuff like that. And it was just really empowering, and I absolutely loved it. And then when it was like, finally, okay, you won the bet, we can do this tonight. And I remember we actually got to this point where it was the last day. Like, well, what time did you make this bet? Like, has it been like 13 days or 14 days? And like, it was almost like to the hour. We're like, so we might have missed it by 12 hours or I forget. But
did he make us, I forget, did he make us nervous to have sex?
No, not at all. We were just like, okay, it was like, yeah, it technically counts as 14 days or something like that. You know, and it just, there was something that was then also really kind of really special about it. And there was, you know, I don't know, to me, became very conscious because I think sometimes sexual urges can take over consciousness, if you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like, all of a sudden you're thinking like, I'm not thinking with the big head anymore. It's like the little head, like downstairs is doing all the thinking. And to basically be able to say, you know what? When we have sex, we're going to consciously choose it. And then we also were able to talk about it a lot. And it wasn't like awkward. It's like, we're ready.
I know. And we also
can't.
had like in that moment, we had time to think about like getting tested for STD and, so it was like really important about like, are we going to have unprotected sex, not unprotected, and how? Like I was like, I am not, like you were like, I think we should get tested. And so you got tested and then I got, it was enough time for us to think about testing, to think about how we wanted to have sex, protected, unprotected, and what that meant, for both of us.
Right. And so we had basically, it was about a month, I forget. It was like, but it was a good enough amount of time. And because it was conscious in this way, the conversations that we had about sex, what do you like, what's important to you, all those conversations we had before we got into the bedroom. And one of the things that that was awesome for me is that once we got into bed, I knew what turned you on, you knew what turned me on, and quite frankly, rarely, if ever in my life, have I had sex for the first time that was that awesome.
Okay, I agree with you. Like, I just never had good. You know what? I've actually never had sex on day one of dating someone. But I've seen it on, like, I feel like the only place that's good is on television. Like Hollywood movies, they make it seem so amazing. So I always have this fantasy about having a one-night stand because it looks amazing. But I'm too paranoid to have a one-night stand.
Yeah, but that's a different thing too. By preparing, like I knew how to make it awesome for you. You knew how to make it awesome for me.
That's true.
And so therefore there wasn't that awkward stuff of like, do you like this? Do you like that? Well, like we talked about it. It was so well thought out in some ways that like one of, it was like, it was amazing. And we're 3.5 years into this and it continues to be amazing. In part, I go back to that beginning of we didn't have any of this. There was none of that weird moments, and just last thing was consciousness around it.
Yeah, I think that was like super important for a relationship. Like our first time having sex wasn't awkward.
It was amazing.